We have a global economy that is incredibly dynamic, complex, and linked, and it is worth $1,300 trillion. The speed of light is being accelerated by it. In a meeting that takes place once a month, the Federal Reserve attempts to divine what monetary policy and the money supply ought to look like based on empirical evidence that is frequently inaccurate. This is seen in the printouts of the GDP. All of the inputs show that it is present. Because of this, we have delegated responsibilities to a small group of people who are using less than ideal inputs. In light of this, I would genuinely question whether or not that obligation ought to be entrusted to a small group of people who are examining flawed data that is 1 month old. The two things that are the most dynamic are also the things that end up being the worst at doing it. Today, we are going to be dropping some truth bombs on you wonderful XRP holders about the Federal Reserve, the monetary system, and the reasons why it is indeed completely broken. Additionally, we are going to discuss what we, as holders of XRP and other cryptocurrencies, can begin to do right now in order to be on the better receiving end of the kind of catastrophe that is undoubtedly going to be happening very soon, at least from my point of view. I am of the opinion that it is not very beneficial for anyone who is in possession of any amount of money, which, let's face it, the most of us in this day and age are absolutely compelled to do. And in order for us to make the transition to the new financial system, which we will be discussing in this video, something extremely unfortunate must take place. In today's presentation, Chamath, who is a remarkable and really clever tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a lot of other things, is going to really be taking all of this down and talking about how he sees he future. Moreover, I believe that this is going to be of great benefit to a great number of you back in your houses. In light of this, I really hope that you guys will pay great attention to what he has to say. I will be offering a lot of context, which will involve delving deeper into the field of cryptography and discussing how we are currently addressing these urgent problems. Press that like button to ensure that this video is viewed by every member of the XRP and cryptocurrency army. Okay, let's get right down to business. There are certain aspects of the Federal Reserve's operations that they are able to carry on with. This is the real question. Furthermore, I believe that everyone would probably agree that it is a good thing. So, in order to ensure that I have things properly, I will be quite detailed here. Are they a lender that offers a last-ditch effort? With regard to my own personal opinion, I do not agree. I believe that Treasury does a better job. I believe that Treasury did that during the great financial crisis. In addition, I believe that the Treasury Department has a more effective process than the Federal Reserve does to ensure that the American taxpayer is successful. They are responsible for the creation of monetary policy and price stability, right? It is my opinion that the capital markets and the free markets are actually more effective at doing that than the other markets. They define the spread in a much more comprehensive manner. Is there oversight and regulation of the financial industry? Indeed, it is likely that they perform a satisfactory job at it. That is probably something that the majority of individuals would claim they possess the ability to continue doing. As a payment system in a clearinghouse, do they perform their duties effectively? Again, this is certainly something that they could continue to do because it is not particularly controversial. My argument is that, Jason, the two things that are the most dynamic are the ones that they are the worst at executing. This is the wider picture. In Lighty, what exactly was the significance of that particular timing? It was on November 22nd, 2021, when Vice President Biden put forward Powell's name for a second term in office. To put it another way, he took part in the entire transitory narrative in order to be renominated by Biden. And then 1 week later, on November 30th, he said that it was time to stop using the word transient. And after that, he basically announced that there would be a change in policy. And after that, they did not raise interest rates for a few more months. And it was a historic tightening cycle, which means that the shock to the economy was extraordinary since the rate and velocity at which he hiked rates was unparalleled. This was the shock that the economy experienced. Therefore, the question that needs to be asked is whether or not he had been honest. It is possible that the economy would have been in a better position if the nomination process had been started much earlier. In addition, the answer is most likely yes, without a doubt. Mainly due to the fact that during the latter half of the year 2021, we had a bubble, specifically an asset bubble. This bubble manifested itself in the realm of startups in real estate. That bubble was fueled not just by rates that were artificially low, but also by the Federal Reserve's continuing purchase of QE assets. Ponder Stan Druckenmiller has made the observation that the Federal Reserve, I believe they purchased approximately $180 billion worth of government bonds and added them to the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. During that period of around 6 months, not only did they oppose the raising of interest rates, but they also continued to implement quantitative easing policies that were intended to mimic the economy. What actions should the Federal Reserve take that would be beneficial in the present day? That is to say, I was able to comprehend how the government moved more quickly than the industry when it was first established. I believe that I am able to make that assertion. As a result of reading it, we were all able to comprehend the state of the economy, which led us to the conclusion that it was time to locate a road that would allow us to glide. On the other hand, the definition of a glide path is 25-25, weight 25, not 50, and eventually 0. So that's hardly a strategy, is it? What Chamath and David Sachs are essentially stating here, and with which I agree entirely, is that the Federal Reserve has been performing a really poor job. When it comes to making judgments on the economy, they are employing fabricated documents and statistics, if we are to be completely honest. And to tell you the truth, I believe that the majority of us are in agreement that we do not want the Federal Reserve to have this power in the first place. Doing something that entirely controls the status of the economy is not something that makes any sense for an official who has not been elected to their position. Why is it that the Federal Reserve is not a public office that we have the ability to vote on? In other words, it is crystal plain to me. This particular private organization was established in this manner for the purpose of allowing select elitists who have certain interests to insert anybody they choose into the group. As soon as they retire from the Federal Reserve, they will either pay them a substantial amount of money under the table through lobbyists or put them on the board of directors of their company. They are able to obtain an insider piece of knowledge on every single item that the Federal Reserve is going to do, which is going to have a significant impact on the price of all assets, including real estate, equities, and the value of the United States dollar, which H is the currency that is used as the reserve currency around the world. Whoever is basically influencing the decisions that the Federal Reserve makes has an endless amount of influence due to... Allow me to listen to what else he has to say. For the election, this is really vital information to have. According to her, we are writing to implore the Federal Reserve to reduce the federal funds rate, and she says that we have been requesting that you reduce the federal funds rate for a number of months now. What's more, it suggests that it might already be too late. Because of your delays, the economy is in danger, and the Federal Reserve has fallen behind the curve. The inflation rate has dropped to 2.5%, which is significantly lower than the peak of 7% that occurred in the middle of 22nd century. She then goes on to effectively imply that employment numbers adjust slowly. Therefore, in order to prevent a potential crisis from developing, the Federal Reserve should implement rate reduction in advance. Therefore, the most important thing to take away from this is that Elizabeth Warren was arguing that Powell needed to make significant cuts while inflation was hitting 2.5%. At this time, Elizabeth Warren is arguing that Powell should not reduce interest rates and instead take a stand against Trump. This is an example of hypocrisy, as you can see. A number of Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren, were urging their friends to reduce interest rates prior to the election. It appears that he caved into the pressure and reduced interest rates by 50 basis points. In addition, once Trump was elected president rather than Kamala, he put an end to the cycle of rate reductions. In your discussion of this topic, you mentioned that the markets reacted, and as a result, they started falling. Without a doubt, you are correct. You are aware of what they did, right? They recalculated the value of that risk well in advance of the Federal Reserve's reorganization. The market has entirely reassessed the situation regarding tariffs over a short period of time, which was only a few weeks. For this reason, I am advising you that it would be more beneficial for us to delegate the mechanism for determining interest rates to the free market. For the reason that when you have institutions such as commerce and treasury publishing more and more real-time data into a blockchain, you will be able to have pricing oracles, Jason, that make these judgments in real time and reprice this. Not at all. Each and every financial institution will have oracles that can divine what they think the risk-free rate will be. Consequently, when you hold a treasury auction, you will be required to submit a bid in order to participate in the auction. Additionally, when individuals make bids, a market clearing rate is reached as a result of the convergence of the bids. Independent of the Federal Reserve, this occurs. Consequently, what I am attempting to convey is that if you genuinely investigate the capacity to finance the government of the United States of America, Treasury, in conjunction with the free market, is able to do the two most important things that take place, and they do so successfully today.